Hello and welcome to our AHDB webinar, Our Robots for You. I'm joined today by business consultant Nigel Hardie from the Dairy Group, and he's going to be telling us all about how the best way to get going on decision making for robots, working out whether automated milking is actually the right way for your farm. Before we do go through this thought process, I'll just take you through a bit of the housekeeping. We have all attendees muted just so we don't get any background noise of dogs or the postman knocking on the door, and it also means that we can concentrate on the speaker. We finish at 1 o'clock today. This webinar is being recorded, so you'll be able to get a link afterwards and you can re-watch it or share it. And we'd like you to please complete the survey at the end, which will help us to improve the quality of any future webinars that you may watch. We do please though welcome questions all the way as we're going through, and you'll see on the screen there's a little orange arrow in the box at the top there which gives you the control panel, and if you click on this white arrow by the questions, you can type your question in there. And please be assured that only myself and the producer can see the questions, which I will read out, so you'll be quite anonymous. Nobody else will know what you're asking, that it's you. Not even dad or granddad, so be quite sure it's all confidential. And I would just like to also bring your attention to the fact that we are asking levy payers to register to be able to vote on the work that we do from April. We'd like to register you first because there's a certain process in place to make sure it's all above board. And from April, you'll be able to give your opinion on whether you think that our levy is best spent on research or overseas promotions and all those kind of things. So we can ask you to do this by going to the website. But if you're really clever and you've got your iPhone, I do believe you can scan this QR code. I had to go with it yesterday and it did work for me. But you could also type into the questions box, if you like, your business trading name, your phone number, and how many litres you produced last year. I can register you on your behalf. Again, it is confidential, as only myself will see that information. Otherwise, please get in touch with your local knowledge exchange manager and they can register you as well. It's really important that we get constructive people and people who use our services to give their views and see how we're going to go forward, and so that we do the best for you with the levy. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. And hello there, Nigel. Okay, so we've asked Nigel to talk to us with his very extensive experience on advising farmers about robots, and I'd just like to put this into context that every now and again my colleagues and I get requests from farmers who've got robots wanting a robot discussion group, and they've got all kinds of problems ranging from we can't benchmark, the costs have gone sky high, there's a mastitis problem, or it just isn't working. And I think when we dig down deeper it always ends up at some point where somebody hadn't really thought things through properly. So I got in touch with Nigel and he did say, and he stressed, and I hope he'll continue to emphasise that as we're going through, it does take time to actually work out if this is the right way for you. It shouldn't be a knee-jerk reaction. Okay, so Nigel, I think if we ask you to share your screen and you can talk us through the thought process, and we'll take questions as we're going along. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. Right, we'll just get going. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for attending. Obviously, we're very topical at the moment. Robots are forefront of some of the grant schemes on the moment, and people are looking at labour issues. So there's a lot of considerations to be made to be able to go forward with a robot decision. So we'll just go through. The 5 points that I've got to begin with, just to look at. Is it the best option for your farm? Robotic milking isn't for everybody, so I think you need to assess the options to see what other ways you have to milk your cows, and different methods of milking, rotary parlours, conventional milking systems. They may well suit you better, so I think you need to go through all those options. A strong point I'll emphasise is you must go around other farms and look at their milking systems, the AMS milking systems. Number one, you'll get a lot of ideas on how things have went well on other farms, but equally you'll pick up on a few times the things that didn't go quite as well. So that it's important to get around and see them working on other farms and ask the pertinent questions when you're on farm. Ideally, if you can go on your own rather than with the dealer that's trying to sell you some equipment, that may get more straightforward answers, but definitely visit. And then budget. That's my strong point to say that you need to be looking at how well the system is going to fit into your business. Will it pay for all the extra costs that you have to employ to get the robots up and running on your farm and the ongoing running costs and service cost? So that needs to be a priority once you've decided on what type of system you're looking at. I think that's pertinent for any type of a big business decision, but probably automatic milking is probably one of the biggest investments after land that you're likely to make. Another point, get your plans down on paper. I was on a farm yesterday, and it's great, I think, that you can get something written down and then you can start looking at it in practical terms, because just standing looking at a building, it's all very well, but getting it on paper, you're more likely to see the good points, but equally where things are bottlenecks or tight places for cows and staff alike. And again, don't be afraid to modify those plans. Just because you've got the plan on paper doesn't mean to say that that should be the final, the one that you go with. And then future proof. It is more difficult with robots because it's basically a chunky investment that you want to milk some more cows. Once you're up to the limits of the robot, you're looking at, say, another 40, 50, 60 cows. It needs another robot machine to be able to make that happen on the farm.
That's a really good starting point. I was just going to say, can we just say what's the recommended time you suggest people spend?
I'd say within reason, I would say 6 to 12 months is what you need to be considering robots for before you take the plunge. I'm obviously aware of the grant schemes come on at the moment, and everybody's going to rush headlong into, yeah, we need the robots now because the grant's on there. But if the grant's the only reason you're looking at robots, I think you should reconsider and make sure that there's a business case for the robots and there's a practical case for the robots on your farm. So to take that time, you'll put yourself in a better position for the next 10 to 20 years, because once you've spent that money, there's a lot of decisions if you want to change your mind, and it's not as easy to backtrack as it is or with the amount of investment that's in there.
Yeah, thank you. Let's get through your agenda then.
So we're looking at the people, the cows, the buildings, feeding, infrastructure, management, and obviously the key one, will it be profitable? So to begin with, because the robots, the way they are, that they're milking your cows without you physically having to touch them, you're going to have to work with a lot of data from the system to work how well the system's operating for you. So you need to be very comfortable with looking at computers, looking at mobile phone apps and alerts, and be able to gauge what the information's telling you and then acting upon it once you've got that data to look at. And all the systems are different, and again, I would encourage you to ask the farmers that when you go on visits to show you some of the graphs and the displays and the lists of reports, so to give you a bit of a heads up as to what you're actually looking for and what you can find out about. Like a lot of these things, you won't need to look at every single cow every single day to find out the minute detail on it, but if you need to, if you have to troubleshoot, the data's there for you to analyze. So it is in effect by management by exception. It'll tell you the cows that haven't visited, for instance, or the cows that yields down. So those are the things that you really need to concentrate to find out and act on them. I mean, it's great having the information, but if you never act on it, you're never gonna make any improvements. And are your cows ready for robots? A lot of things to consider. What's the current yield levels? Do you expect milk to go up when you go onto robots? If you're already milking 3 times a day, the change onto a robotic system may not show you as great a yield increase as you might expect. If your genetics in your herd aren't very high to start with, you're not going to get the same increase as you would do of a high genetic merit cow. So again, be realistic on what you're expecting from the system. And also looking at issues that you currently have. Do you have a cell count problem? Do you have a back to scan problem? It may well be that the robot may help you to improve those, but you need to look at the issues to start with. Why have I got that problem? Is it a staffing issue? Is it an equipment issue? Is it a housing issue? To make sure that you're aware of the problem before you start. And it won't be the silver bullet that you expect that the robot will solve all your problems. So please be aware of that to begin with. It may well help, but you're still looking at management issues to help you achieve those good quality results. And then again, looking at health issues as well, to say with the cows, to see what else is out there as far as considerations to look at for disease and everything else that may impact on the suitability for the robots. And again, we're looking at levels of lameness. How do you foot bath at the moment? How can you incorporate that into a system afterwards? It's probably one of the biggest points that there's no complete answer to the foot bathing query. There's a lot of different solutions and a lot of people make them all work, but I don't think there's any one solution that's better than any others. It's back to, if you want to make that work on your farm, you'll make it happen. Whether you divert cows through a race to go through a foot bath, or you have foot baths on the exits to robots, they've all got the benefits, but they've all got the drawbacks as well. Fertility is another issue that plays into the efficiency of the robot. If you can get good, efficient return to being in calf again, you're going to have a much tighter milk yield across the herd. So it's much more compatible with the robot system, rather than have a lot of cows that are given smaller amounts of milk that don't give you efficiency of operation. Because even if they milk twice a day, it's the length of time they're in the robot that could be taking up space that a more efficient cow could be using. So fertility is a key point to make sure that the system works efficiently. Milk and speed, another one that's crucial to getting the maximum capacity out of a robot. Some of your conventional system, parlor system, probably tell you milk and speed at the moment. It's maybe something you don't look at regularly, but I have heard between under 2 kilos a minute up to 3 kilos, 3.5 kilos a minute milk speed, and that vastly dictates what the capacity of the robot is for a given milk yield. Confirmation, again, it's crucial, but maybe not as critical as it used to be when robots first came out. I think the manufacturers are all the time trying to improve the attachments and for detecting teats and the mode of attaching the cups to the individual teats. So at one point, folk were a bit nervous about how many cows they'd have to cull, but at the moment, I think it'd be very, very small the number of cows that you would need to cull from most herds. But again, be aware of that as an issue as to a lot of older, deeper uddered cows may have more of an issue adapting to the robot.
Sorry, is this the point where you ask, are these suitable only for all year round calving herds rather than herds that calve with any sort of block?
It's back to the capacity. If you've got a lot of cows calving in a shorter period of time, you're going to have to reduce the numbers that you're able to cope with that system. So you would need more robots to cope with the same number of cows compared to an all year round calving herd that's regular monthly calving numbers from cows or new heifers entering the herd. So it does have limitations on your capacity of your system if you've got a lot of fresh cows compared to an even distribution across the calving stages. Okay
then, so we've got a nice lovely udder shot here.
Well, I say I won't name the farmer, but I mean I took this picture on farm that the guy was going into robots, and give him his due, he was not going to put this cow on the robot, he was going to go down the road, but it just shows it that is a cow that you will struggle to get an automatic milking unit on because of the placement of that rear teeth. But generally speaking, they're much better than they used to be, say 10 years ago for attachments. And again, just issues with cleanliness of cows. just to make sure that cameras and lasers can see things. So the dried on dung that's on this cow's here, it can tend to interfere with the attachment. So again, it's back to the system originally. How good are your cubicles? How good is your slurry system to keep beds clean? So all the sort of the dried on dung that can interfere with the confusing the laser or the camera to decide, is that a teat or is that a bit of dung there? So clipping and singeing is obviously a key part of that, but it is a big consideration because you're not there to obviously decide whether the cow needs more cleaning or less cleaning on a particular day. The robot has to make that decision as its standard item. Again, don't get me wrong, if you're on a grazing system, you could probably make the system clean those cows a little bit more before they're actually milked, because they say they're walking through a dirtier gateway. But equally, it comes back to, is that the system that you want to make your gateways better and to prevent the issue rather than work with trying to solve the problem afterwards? Like, so prevention, as in anything, prevention is a lot better than trying to cure a system. And then obviously probably the main part of what everybody's concerned with is the buildings, and are your current buildings good enough and can they be adapted? There's many good buildings out there, don't get me wrong, and a lot of new buildings probably don't get the credit for the improvements that robots make to a business, because of the fact that the cows have benefited from moving into the new building as much as they've benefited from moving to 3 times a day milking system. So you can make a compromise, but you should be aware of that compromise at the start, that if you haven't quite got the space, you'll never have the extra space as you go forward. So new buildings are good, but it's going to be back to the finances available to say how much do we need to spend on this system to make it work. I would say at the moment, probably over the last few years, maybe 50–60% are in adapted buildings, and the balance are in new greenfield sites or a new building on a farm. But they can be adapted very well, and the standard one is basically extend the shed by a couple of bays, and normally that means that you've got between the end of the robot or the side of the robot, if you look at it from sideways on, between the end of the robot and the end of the cubicle run, there should be at least 5 meters there to give you a lot of space to be able to give the cows opportunities to come up when they want to come up and not feel intimidated by a really tight, narrow passage that they need to navigate before they can get into a robot system. Again, it's more important for the sort of lower order cows and heifers that tend to be a bit shyer. They'll come up and get milk, but they probably won't be milked as often if you've got compromise on how well that location is. Just to sort of jump ahead a little bit on the guided free access systems, I think we're heading towards now that the majority of systems going in are free access. The guided ones are probably less favour now because of the fact that there's a bit more expense and a bit more infrastructure to get them set up. But most successful operations run on free access now. And yes, you will have to fetch more cows on a free access system compared to the guided system. But again, it's back to feeding and management that reduces those numbers that you need to bring forward, say 2 or 3 times a day.
Can we just clarify?
Sorry,
can we just clarify what you mean by a guided system versus free access?
Well, the guided systems are basically a holding pen close to the robots, so that cows either have to go through that pen or through the race to get to feed, and then they're either diverted into the pen to be milked, or equally if they're coming from the feeding area and they're guided through the race and decide whether they want to be milked before they go back to the housing. That's the basics of the guided system. So you've got a lot more gates, a lot more selection gates and holding pens. And again, you sometimes can get the issue that you've got 4 or 5 cows in the holding pen, and it depends on how bossy the cows are. You can get some cows that get held in there for a longer period of time before they get access to get milked. Whereas the free access is basically, it's just the robot, the gate will open on the robot to let the animal in to be milked, and there's very little gating afterwards to limit the access to the system. It can get complicated when you decide where they want to go afterwards. Do they want to guide them into a holding pen? Do you want to guide them into an AI pen, or into a different section of the building? You can end up putting more systems in there to divert cows afterwards. But it all needs to be thought about. And again, it's back to space. With guided systems, you probably end up putting a little bit more space between the end of the cubicles and the robots to make sure that there's capacity for all the races and the access and the gates.
Okay, and we have got a question come in.
Yep.
When we're talking about how many units you need, is there a rule of thumb, or do you have to work it out individually per farm?
I think you need to work it out on your individual farm as to what your milk yield is. Obviously, if you've got your highly yielding cows doing 35-40 litres, you'll have less capacity on the system than if you have 25 litre cows that's only what you're expecting from them. You'll be able to put more cows on if they're low yielding. And then you're back to the milking speed, which if you haven't got the evidence before you start, you'll soon find out how fast your cows milk when you put them in a robot. And again, that has a massive limiting factor if your cows are slower milkers than the average.
Okay. And in terms of groups of cows, how do you group them? Do you have them all at the same stage of lactation, or is there a mix within a robot?
The general advice is the better way to run them is to have a mix of cows in the group from a capacity point of view. From a feeding point of view, you could argue that there's possibilities. If you have enough cows and you've got two sides to a building, you would have the high yielding cows on a slightly better diet so that they don't need topped up as much in the robot, and then the other side of the building would have slightly more cows at a slightly lower feeding regime. But it's back to how easy is it to mix and match those capacity of the cubicles in those halves of the building, as it were. So I've seen various ways that people will move a gate up one of the passageways to limit the capacity on one side, but still to let cows go around and lie down on the other half of the building, in effect. But generally speaking, if you can get a mix of cows, you've got the benefit of the cow that's only coming twice a day mixed with the cows that are coming for 5 times per day as well. So it builds you more capacity into the system, rather than have every cow needing to come 5 times a day because they're such high yielding cows. You will limit how many cows you can get on that system.
I think we're already learning there's a lot of logistics involved to this. Yeah. You don't just stick a robot in. We've got another question just before we let you move on. What about a guided exit to help with foot bathing? But I suppose that could be a guided exit for fertility reasons as well, or vet treatment, could it?
Yeah, it is just selection gate at the end. Again, it depends how the system's set up. I've seen some systems, maybe 3 robots in a row, and they nearly have to have guided access, so they've only got guided exit, so that you have only got one selection gate at the end of the run. But a lot of systems run head-to-head robots, and so when the cows leave, the gates would select them, say, into behind the robot working area, into a holding pen there. So it depends. You can end up with fewer selection gates, but it needs to be thought about. I think it's one area that I've seen that from nobody wanting a selection area or a segregation area to somebody wanting all the bells and whistles to say, I want AI cows in here, I want TLC cows in there, and I want the foot bath set up on another day. Then you can make it as complicated as easy as you want. One comment that people say is, oh, well, the cows are that much quieter that I can AI them in the cubicle divisions. And that may well be right, but you can't do everything in a cubicle with a cow. So whatever you still need good handling systems to be able to handle cows with regular routine vet visits and testing and what have you as well. So,
thank you. That's good.
And then again, depends on the manufacturer. Some have in the past been more swayed towards a system where it's guided access rather than free access. And don't get us wrong, new buildings are great because I say you've got all the space you need. You can decide to make the passages 5 meters, 6 meters, wherever you want. You've got that choice when you go for the new building. The feeding and water space is important, and locating water troughs close to the robots is a good point to have them. So when they're finished milking, they'll come back and they'll have a drink of water before they go to either feed or lie down. No, getting that building correct at the beginning is worth as much as getting which robot you want to use, as it were, because you'll make sure that your cows are coming forward in good, clean condition, their access is good, and the feeding access, they can go to feed whenever they want to, wherever they want to on that building. And I don't think we should underestimate how well a building can help the system run. And again, looking at ventilation and lighting, especially nowadays as more and more cows are getting kept in 365 days of the year. I know there's consideration with some of the milk contracts, they're looking to make sure that there is grazing access, but we need to be sure that ventilation is good. I know we don't get many hot days up in the north here, but in the summer on a lot of southern units, there is more of an issue that ventilation needs to be made sure it's correct. And again, the bedding surface and the lying area for the cow, that needs to be comfortable, obviously, but that's equally with any system. But again, if the cow's clean, she'll have less issues when she comes back into the robot to be milked. Another couple of things: straw yards and bedding materials. Straw yards can work, and they do work. The only issue you could argue with the straw yard is the fact that how well you keep that management of the building to make sure the yards are kept clean. And if you get any straw hanging onto the udder, that can interfere with the machine to be able to scan where the teats are. It may get confused. But again, that's back to the logistics of how the yard's operating and how well your straw, whether it's chopped or broken down, to make sure that it's not as big a problem. And sand's another issue. The manufacturer will let you use sand if you want to put it that way, but there's obviously more of a concern about the wearability and the length of time that things will last. Some of the cords that will tend to wear out much faster, and a few will put chains on instead of a cord for taking off units from each quarter of the cow. So there's issues there, but it has to be taken into account. It is a great material for bedding, don't get me wrong, but it does have implications on wearing of equipment.
Nigel, is there an ideal bedding type then?
Honestly, I think it's back to the operator. You'll make any bedding material work if you want to work at it. It's like a sand-based system. On paper, you could argue it's the best system in the world. Yeah. But if you've got dung in there, you haven't got a bed in. You've got dung in your bed. So it's equally the same, that if you manage your system well, you can make any system work. Chopped straw, sawdust, some of the lime-based products, a lot of those systems can work really well. So it's just back to what management you need to put in and how well you go about it. So
okay.
And then just a couple of some pictures on some buildings. Obviously, it's a good wide shed with plenty of space and air above the cow. A lot of light coming into the building as well. Again, we can look at that as far as some places we may be considering we've got too much light coming in, and we'll get more heat problems in the summer because of it. So that may be a consideration to see how much light do we need in these buildings. But again, daylight's cheap compared to putting loads of electric light fittings into buildings to make sure cows can see where they're going, as it were. And there's another example of a building. Yeah, plenty of light coming into this one, but ventilation wise, there's not much not much ventilation going on in this building. You can see all the bedding is hanging onto the walls and hanging onto the roofs, and it's not an ideal scenario for the cows to be in that building. So again, looking at what you can do with taking the side sheets down to try and make that ventilation better to convert an existing building, especially in the summertime. That would be just a bit of a sauna, I feel. So again, this is another building. This is obviously a new building, nice wide passages. So again, you haven't got to build up a dung in those passages. You've got loads of room for cows to walk up and down the back of the cows that's feeding. And this one here, if you can see this little pipe here that the farmer uses to pull across this passageway to shut it off while he's doing some work on say scraping out the front of the system, or trying to divert a few cows somewhere else that he wants to manually take out of the building. So just some of those small things as to how you shut off passages and be able to work on them while the robots are operating. It's there's a lot of little things like that you can see when you go around on your visits. And then the considerations while you're working on the systems: how do you scrape out, how do you bed up, how do you feed, and how do you handle cows. Those are major considerations, because yeah, obviously a lot of people are quite happy to put automatic scrapers in, but again, slatted floors may be a better option for you. Automatic scraping systems, sort of mobile autonomous systems that work on their own, may be an option for you that could do a better job, and you don't have the build-up of dung. You can see on the floor of that building there that there's a lot of water sitting, pooling. So again, getting your levels right is a strong point. I mean, this previous building is built on a slope, so you can see that there's no pooling of water there. And yeah, obviously it's just been scraped, don't get me wrong, but it does have an impact as to how much is splashing going on and whether that impacts on keeping the others clean. Bedding up, again, do you go in and you do a little bit of bedding all the time? Whenever you're in the building, do you take a sack of sawdust in to drop onto beds, or do you have to chase cows out to run in with a machine to be able to fill beds up, top them up with sand or sawdust or anything? The less you can interfere with the cow when she's in that building, the far better the cow will perform. She gets on with it, she makes her own mind of when she wants to go. And the classic anecdote I get off my farmers is if in the summertime when they're making silage and they're really busy and they come back to the robot to do the routines, performance usually goes up because they're not in the building dragging cows out to do a bit of feed work on, or going in and doing some work on some cubicles or something. They get much better performance when they're left to their own devices. So the less you can be in there within practical reality, the better for the cow to get used to the system and to manage on a regular basis. Again, feeding, do you need to move cows to feed them, or have you got troughs on the outside of buildings so that you can just run along at any time of day to make sure that they're fed? Or do you go for an automated system so that cows can be topped up 3, 4, 5 times a day, and pushing up feed even on a flat trough system? That can encourage cows to get up to feed, and it encourages cows to go to the robot as well once they're being fed. So a lot of those considerations come into play to how much performance you get out of it. Anecdotally, again, it's the pushing up, automatic pushing up systems. They tend to get another 2 kilos of dry matter intake a day per cow, because basically you're presenting fresh feed to cows more often. And handling cows, again, I've mentioned the fact that they would divert them through a segregation gate at the robot, but equally, probably as we go further south in the country, the issues with TB and regular testing, it is a big consideration. And I'm surprised I've been on some newly installed robot systems, and they've never thought about how they're going to handle the whole herd when they come to a TB testing day, for instance. Like, yeah, they can cope with 3 or 4 cows to get AI'd, or 5 or 6 cows to get PD tested, but vaccinations and testing is another issue that they need to consider.
I think you were saying before as well, because psychologically the cow isn't used to being herded anymore into the collecting yard. and
That's
to
it.
then
The
try and get
cow's
groups
much
of
more laid
cows.
back. So yeah, the cow's much more laid back, and which is good for the cow's point of view. But she's not used to this getting herded and moved into an area to be treated differently. And again, anecdotally, every hour that you lose from milking time, you'll tend to find it takes 3 or 4 hours for the cows to get back to normal. So if it means you're having to move all the cows out in one group to be run through a race and a crush to get some of these treatments done, it can take a lot of time out with the robot. This is just an example of a self-locking yoke system. It's one solution that people go for, and then they can just keep all the cows ready to be seen by the vet, or to be injected, or whatever it is, or singed, or whatever, to make sure that the system can work freely. So they're getting used to that every day. So again, it isn't such a big change for the cows to be done anything special with on an occasion. So
just on that point then, what we're talking about going from a milking parlour to robots, the theory is that you're saving, 4+ hours a day. Some people are still spending 4 or 5 hours milking in really old systems, but you're not necessarily going to have loads of free time in which to have leisure, are you? You've got a different routine.
Yeah, you've still got your regular routine. You have to go to change filters and check on which cows need to be brought forward, and obviously you've still got all your drying off, your foot trimming and everything else like that. So you've still got all your management tasks with the cows, and you've got a routine. I think it's just reallocating your time as much as anything to be able to manage the herd in a different way. And I think there is labour savings to be had, but maybe not as much as people believe that they could cut labour down. Don't get us wrong, there's some old inefficient parlours that, you probably argue, we've got 2 people in there at the moment, and if we put a big efficient one person parlour in, we would save labour. And equally, it's the same with a good efficient system on a robot system. If you have lots of ways of segregating cows out automatically, I mean, the classic one, I was in Holland a few years ago, and the wife on that farm happened to be a vet, and she had it set up so that every day she had something happen. So on a Monday it was maybe drying cows off, on a Tuesday it was a foot trimming day, Wednesday was PD, Thursday was non-breeders, and whatever else you might have. And she had 3 or 4 cows every day in the stall at 7 o'clock in the morning when she went out, and they were ready to be treated. She did her work, and then she went off to work to do her vetting during the day. So it's maybe a different mindset. Rather than we'll have a big vet day, it may be a case that you can split it down into smaller packets to be able to manage the cows easier and not have as much disruption going on with the cows. So
more efficient.
Around that bit is probably the hardest thing. Yeah. And then obviously other things to consider is disruption while you're building, because obviously if you're converting existing buildings, that does come with that sort of problem. And cows are very accommodating, don't get me wrong. I've seen some convoluted ways to get cows through a building while there's some work's going on, but bear it in mind. I mean, you may even have to go down the route that, we'll milk the cows in another area with a mobile milker, or this type of thing that you could put in place. But again, they've all come with a cost, and they're all to be built into your budget to make sure that it's relevant to the cost that you're going to have to part with. And again, get some plans drawn. I mean, don't get us wrong, that plan will not be the one that you actually get built, but that first plan is important to get something down on paper, and you can have a good look at it and find out where the good points are and where the bottlenecks are, to be able to say, I can see now that place there is too small. It is too narrow for cows to go through. There isn't enough room there for cows to go and get into a segregation pen. And again, take independent advice. I mean, don't get me wrong, the robot guys are good. They're trying to sell you a machine, so they want it to work for you, don't get me wrong. And they'll provide you with some good information, but equally, it's your money that's getting spent. So take some independent advice, share it with the advisors coming on your farm, your vet. Is he confident that what you're thinking of doing works well for him? Will it save him time when he comes on the farm? Because again, that's another consideration. If you're going to start having to go around looking for cows when the vet turns up to be treated, well, it's not going to make best use of his time. And again, nutritionist and consultant, they'll have their input on what they think will be the best system to how much trough space you need, how much water you need. So take advantage of all these people to try and make sure that you've got the best ideas for your particular location. And then finally on that one is, don't assume the builder knows what you want. So having plans drawn is definitely a great point to be made, to make sure that you've designed it and everybody knows what they need to do. And it'll save you time while the building's getting put up, even if it's an extension to a building or a modification to a building, that everybody knows what the plan is, and you're not going to have to waste time while it's getting built deciding on what needs done, and especially not needing to change something at a later date because you've the builder's made a mistake, or you've made a mistake not telling the builder what needs done. So,
Nigel, we've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
How long would it take cows to get settled? How long should we allow them to get settled into being milked by robot?
How long's a bit of string, but generally speaking, most systems you should be running 10 days to a fortnight. Cows should be able to go on their own by then, and with less input. But I would have still said 6 months to a year before you've got all the cows doing what you want them to do. There's some cows will just be, you maybe think it's the most placid cow on a conventional system, but she could be the cow that really doesn't objects to being herded through another gap to be milked in a robot. So it is how long's a piece of string a little bit, but yeah, within 10 days to a fortnight, when you've started up, you should be able to say that we've got most things happening. You sort of 80-90% there with what you're expecting to see, and the improvements will take 6 months to a year before you get everything coming through well. Yeah. One of my guys, he started last January, and we've got cows calving down for the second time into the system, and they're just flying now because I say they know the system off by heart now, so they're going great because they know the advantage of coming in, getting the cake, and milking well on it. They're not getting diverted and herded and moved around to try and bring them in. They've just got this back to this nice routine. So
yeah. So cows are quick learners. What about heifers? Could they form a separate heifer group on a robot system, or should they be mixed in with cows?
I've seen it both ways. I mean, I think heifers, in theory, you're easiest animal to learn because they don't know anything else. So bringing them into the system, ideally on a startup, you could argue we should be running through the robots, just getting a little bit of tickle of cake, just to get used to going through the machine and getting it dirtied up a little bit, so that they get used to what the process is. And then when you do startup day, you start putting cups on. But equally, they can learn off each other. So mix them in with another group of older animals. I think it's back to your personal choice. You can probably back to the situation if it's just a heifer group. You've got many more animals that you need in there because of the yield variation between the heifer and a more mature cow. So you could argue you could get more capacity, but it's horses for courses. I think it's back to the individual preference of the farm and how they work the system. Yeah.
Okay, good. So we'll gallop on a bit through the feeding. Yeah. And yeah.
So looking at feeding, obviously it has implications on how you feed, because there's a lot of places probably going from a full TMR diet to going back to feeding concentrates in the robot compared to not feeding in the parlour. And it's how you allocate those feeds that has an impact on how much capacity you can get off. So if you're just feeding a silage diet outside, you'll be limited to how much extra you need to feed above that to feed the cows. So be aware of that when you're coming to make your allocations to the diet in the trough and what you can put through the robot. Rules of thumb, generally speaking, you set the trough diet sort of 7 kilos or so less than what the average is for that group of cows that's on the robots, and that generally gives them enough variation to say they're not full enough that they won't come at all because they've been satisfied at the trough, and it gives them enough incentive to come to get the sweeties, as it were, to come into the robot to get the extra feed. The limits on how much you can feed in the robot, it's back to how much would they eat at our visit. I would tend to say 3 kilos at a visit is probably the most that most cows will eat. Again, the faster milking they are, you'll tend to find out they won't stay in long enough to eat all that concentrate allocation. So again, it's critical that we know some of those answers to be able to say what do we need to do with that system. Obviously, you can make settings so that they stay in the robot until they finish the cake, even if they finish milking, but then you've got an expensive autopilot feeder. So it can be done on individual cows, and that's fine, that can make it work, but on a herd basis, it can take up a lot of time when you're not making the robot use for milking. So
we've got 2 points there then. Can we just, are we going to emphasize here that the cows only go into the robot because they want the food?
It's a little carrot and stick sort of thing. You don't want to be using a stick with robot cows. You want to be using the carrot and making the cows come to the robot. So yeah, I know I may get slated for this, but there's no such thing as a robot only cake. There's good quality cakes that can go in a robot, put it that way. That you want good nuts, you want one that'll stand up to going through an auger. It needs to be palatable and attractive to the cow. So if your cake fits all those bills, great, it'll go in the robot system and it'll attract cows to it. But I think, yeah, the issues that some things will probably deter cows from going, and it's how much you're expecting cows to eat. If you're expecting to eat 3 kilos a visit and you expect them to come 5 times a day, yeah, potentially you can get 15 kilos of cake into them, but it might not be the correct way to feed that individual cow. It may be better for the cow to take more out of the complete diet in a trough to be able to get more balanced diet rather than just a slug feeding concentrate if you're not careful. So I think that there's a happy medium between the two.
And I think as well, we need to just mention that cows don't just go in there to be milked. So they are relying on that cake in there, aren't they?
Yeah, they need that top up of the concentrates to make sure that they're over the day they're getting a balanced diet to match the amount of milk that you're getting from. Yeah.
So we had a question that will out of parlour feeders work with a robot system?
Yes, they can do, and probably the more of a place when there's a bigger variation in yield between the cows in the group, so that you could top up the high yielding cows rather than try and give them too much in the robot, or having the trough diet set at such a high level you end up with staler cows get too fat. And yeah, the limitations on that are you have to limit when they can go to the autopilot feeder between when they're due to be milked again, so that you limit that they're, say, a couple of hours before they've got access back to the robot. You would limit that they can't go to the autopilot feeder, so they've got the incentive, and they will get trained. They're clever than we give them credit for, to be honest, the cows, and they will work out for themselves that they won't get any more cake on the autopilot feeder, so they will go back to the robot. So they can work successfully, but again, we're looking at as a percentage of the herd it will be topping up in the autopilot feeder. Yeah.
Okay, and I don't know if this is a question you can answer or it's really a nutritionist one, but about like starchy cake types compared to other types.
Yeah, I mean, if we're driving yield, we probably want more starchy in there to try and get them, and maize-based concentrates are good because they're a bit more, again, nice and palatable. Again, I think it's back to that individual farm. What have you got ingredients on the farm, and balance up a diet, and making sure that your trough diet is balanced to start with, and then all you're doing is topping up with the concentrates in the robot above that level. I wouldn't like to think that we're balancing the trough diet with the concentrates in the robot to make up for any shortfall in the outside diet. I think that tends to be make it more difficult for the cows to manage that system. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, let's carry on then.
And then I've mentioned some of these things already. Obviously, the quality of your robot cake and pushing up. And again, there's opportunities. People are looking at automatic feeding of the trough diet as well, so that they can top up many times per day and actually give fresh feed to cows. And it's an option to look at. I mean, if you've gone down this route to say we need to save some labour, it can be an option. But again, it needs probably even more thinking about than milking the cows, because it's how do you get the forages to the feed kitchen, as it were, and how does that work? How does it go around the system on its own? How many times it need to go? It has there's a lot of points to consider on that, and probably it's an item on its own, really. Like and grazing, that's another one that how does that fit into logistics of the job for getting cows out to grass? You probably lose on, generally speaking, maybe half a visit per day per cow. So if your cows are averaging 3 visits per day and you went to a grazing system in the spring, you'd probably end up with 2.5 visits per day off those cows. So it does impact a bit on performance, but your argument may be that, well, I'm feeding a cheaper forage to my cows, so I can make up my margin by the fact that I'm feeding a cheaper feed. This slide's obviously somebody that's been zero grazing, and that can be an option to get grass into cows in the summertime rather than grazing. But obviously, it's got another cost. You have another machine to work out to how it's going to fit into the system, and then the physical thing of getting out to the field, bringing grass in to regularly. It's another job on top of your normal feeding regime.
So we've had a couple of questions about the grazing. In an ideal world, do you think it is something that can work with, say, a rotational grazing system?
Yes, it can work. But it'll limit. It does limit what your absolute performance could be. If you said what's the system that'll get the most production and most efficiency out of a robot, I would have said, yeah, 365-day housing is the one that's going to give you the most capacity and efficiency. But no, you can make grazing systems work. You can make them work, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, and we will come on to costs, but I think we also need to be mindful of the cost return on your investment here, that if you're only going to get 2 to 2.5 visits.
Yeah, well, I'd say it's how much more. Are you looking for an improvement in efficiency, or are you trying to save labour? I mean, yeah, it's the whole package that you're looking at. If you've got an older parlour system that's taken 6 or 7 hours per day and it's taking them a lot of labour to do it, and you can go to a simpler system, you maybe not get any more production, but it actually saves you labour costs and gives you more management time. Well, that may be your priority rather than totally getting the maximum performance out of the system. But it's not the cheapest system to milk cows, is it? At the end of the day, you've got quite an investment there to say 120 cows, minimum couple of 100,000 in equipment. So it can be quite costly, but it's back to the labour saving and the other savings that you've got and the efficiencies built into the system that can make it beneficial.
Okay, so let's have a look at your further slides.
So again, we're on to, this is just an example just to show you how one of the reports works up for your management side of it. And this one here is showing you milk yield in the top line. This red line here is the feed. So that's useful to know that you're matching up your feed rate to your peak yields. The other greeny brown line here, there's a weigher on this particular system, so it's useful indication to show you that your negative energy is only lasting sort of 30 days, and then cows are starting to put on weight again. So that they're good indicators that your system is working well. So again, it's just a good visual idea to show that the benefits you can get from management from the system. And then infrastructure, again, we're looking at power supply, whether you're working on single phase, 3-phase, whether that needs to be upgraded or not. Generators, very important, because we're back to, if your system's down for an hour, you're taking 3 or 4 hours to catch up. So I know the part farm assurance now, but it's more important than ever on a robotic system. With a conventional system, you could argue, well, yeah, if I'm a couple hours late milking because I've got things to sort out, that'd be okay for one day. But with a robotic system, you'll never get that milk back again because your cows are playing catch up. Renewable energy can be good because your solar panels, for instance, can run a lot of the system fairly well on their own because you've got smaller pumps. You haven't got the big startup load on some of these big vacuum pumps on the big rotary parlours, for instance. Broadband mobile phones, they're important. The broadband to be able to access the system, for your engineers to access it remotely. and your mobile phone to make sure you've got a good signal that you can access the alerts and the apps to be able to take account of the issues that's going on. You can be able to find out which cows need to be brought forward. So if you're on your mobile phone and you're at the far end of the shed, you don't need to come back to the main office to find out which cows need collecting. You can get it on your mobile phone. So again, back to efficiency of operation. And then the last two, like tanker access, just basically some people end up having to shut cows in to get tankers through to where milk tank is, and that's obviously it's important consideration for the tanker driver, and it does impact again if you're shutting cows away from the robot. And I think grazing have already tackled that. And then just management, obviously I would say you need to be as good a stockman with a conventional with as good a stocksman or better with a robotic system than you have to be with a conventional system, because you've got that issue. You're not touching the cow twice per day. When you're coming to milk, you're not finding out what's going on with it. And walking around the shed, it'll be time well spent, because you can see things that you can probably spot before even the system tells you there's something going on. And again, it's all by monitoring and management by exception. So it's changing your mindset a little bit to be more proactive with your management and try and prevent things and to try and get ahead of the game rather than trying to play catch up and do problem solving after the event.
We've got a question on this bit. Can we do things like do PD testing using the milk on a robot? Or,
yeah, some of the manufacturers have that option built in. It's obviously an extra cost, and there's reagent to be used to be able to find out the status of the cow. But yeah, it can be a useful tool. It's back to the actual cost is the thing that I'm still struggling with to find out the exact cost on a system for a year to say whether it's more advantageous than current systems. But yeah, there's finding out the levels in the cow's milk that can give them a lot of indications on feeding and fertility and things like that. So there's a lot of issues there that we can bolt onto the system to be able to help.
And it sounds like they'll keep developing that kind of thing going forward.
Yeah. I think there's a lot more research getting done in those areas that we'll be able to tell a lot more as time goes on. But the benefit of the robotic system is you don't need to buy 40 units to put into a conventional parlour. You need to just buy 3 or 4 that you could bolt onto your existing robot system. So it's got its advantages, the smaller number of units that you've got on the farm.
That's good, thanks.
And then I say we're getting run short of time, but we're looking at profitability, and that obviously budgets. That's the thing that really needs to. You need to, once you've made your mind up, that's what you're looking at. Then you need to go through your budget to see if it's viable and include all your costs, the running costs, the ongoing service costs, and ask the manufacturers and the dealers those questions to see what you need once you've bought the machine, because there is variations in how much your running costs are. Electricity costs are vary between manufacturers as well. So ask those questions, and then you've got some answers to base your decisions on. The grant aid, I've just been made aware that we've actually the robot grant has just been launched today for access to the first stage to see whether they're eligible now. So I didn't want to tell you at the beginning in case you're rushed away to try and get in on that, but it is live at the moment. I think that's to the 16th of March for the first stage of the grant application. So, but you don't base your decision on going to robots on whether you're going to get a grant or not. I think the business viability needs to be made sure that you're happy with before you ever get to the stage that the grant's the only thing that's going to make it pay for us. Then come back to 5 key points. Obviously, is it the option for your farm?
Got some questions on the finances.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. First one is, are the electricity costs a lot higher?
Not a lot higher. The some units are probably on a par, or maybe say 10% higher in that sort of ballpark. Again, it depends on the individual system, and again, how much of the time spent cows milking. Again, if you back the more efficient, faster milking cow, you can get the same amount of milk for less input, if you know what I'm saying. So it's back to the efficiency of the unit that can impact on that electricity use.
And have you got any ideas on costs in pence per litre of running with a robot?
Of course. You're putting us on the spot now a bit. Again, it depends on the individual farm and how they're set up. So I wouldn't like to just stab at a number out of the air on that one. Like, no.
Okay. I did hear anecdotally from another farmer it was an extra 2 to 3p a litre for the robot costs, but he's a very efficient farmer.
But that's not just electricity, that's for everything. Yes, yeah, I mean, for
just
service
costs, compared to a conventional parlour. So one person was asking maintenance contracts at £12,000 a year. You know, is this normal? What's the range?
That won't be per robot. It'll be less than that per robot. I would have said between 2 and 6 per robot, roughly speaking. But again, it depends what you want. Depends what you want done. Whether you're going to change the liners yourself, which is basically the bells and whistles contract and including chemical costs and everything, or you're going to be doing as much as you can servicing as far as you can go on your own bat, or whether you're going to get the dealer to do all that cost. So it's a big area, and there's different levels of service that you need to look at. So again, ask those questions as to what you're getting for your money for the service contract. Like, so,
there's quite a few on the finances. Have you got a ballpark figure for return on investment with a robot?
Every farm's different at the moment. I think it's a difficult one to say, because you're back to what yield level you're going for, what's the savings on labour, and how much more costs have you got for putting a building up or an extension to a building. So honestly, that is a whole kind of worms as to how profitable the systems can be. Yeah, there's some that are doing as well, if not better, than some of the conventional systems, but equally on our costing system, we've got herds towards the bottom end of the range on those figures. So it depends on the individual farm. Like, so no.
It's really important to realise it's not a magic thing that's going to miraculously convert poor management, is it?
No, I got criticised once when I was giving a talk, and I said, well, it depends whether you're a Premier League manager or a Championship League manager in football. You're working to a different level, and it's your skill set as well as to how you want systems to work. It does reflect on your management and your ability to make the system work. Yeah.
And what sort of replacement time are we allowing for a robot? How often do they need to be replaced?
Again, it's how much they're getting used and that, but generally speaking, you're talking 10 to 15 years is the life of a robot, depending on how well you're maintaining them and what the capacity of the robot is, whether you're working them to the absolute limit or whether you're working on a more relaxed regime with the number of cows that's going through and the yield that you're expecting from them. But that's generally speaking the range. But I think the manufacturers are getting much more in tune with that, to say that they don't want to make too many changes to systems, because they want to be able to just lift the unit off the platform and be able to put a new one back on again. They don't want to be saying you're going to rearrange your whole building to be able to put another set of robots on there in a few years, in say 10, 15 years time, when they're ready for a new set. They're much more aware of that issue, that they're trying to make sure that the farmer will stay with the same manufacturer, so that they're making that much more easier to accommodate.
Yeah, that's really good. A final question on the finances about the grant scheme. I think, is it only available in England?
In England, sorry, yes, sorry, yeah. I know I was speaking a bit generally there, but no doubt there'll be similar type schemes in the other countries, but at the moment, sorry, that's only the English scheme that I was discussing. Sorry.
Okay, that's good. So I think we covered future plans as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is the issue that robots are chunky investments, because if you want to milk a few more cows, within reasons, you can milk a handful more cows on the system if it's up to capacity, but very, very tight. You need to put another robot in to milk another 50, 60, 70 cows, wherever the system is. So it's chunky investment if you're going to go forward. So try and build that into your system as best you can as to how you might operate if you put another added another building to the system. Again, some systems will work with robots on part of the herd and then conventional system on the other, and it's a good way to probably spread the investment. You're taking pressure off the existing parlour, but the issue is that you've got best of both worlds and you've got worst of both worlds as well. So your time might not be your own for several years until you get onto either fully one system or the other. But, it's an option to try and spread costs over a longer period. Yeah,
that's really good.
And then we're basically back to the sort of first slide that I had in the 5 key points. You've done all these considerations. Is it the best system for your farm? Have you visited all these other farms and you still think it's the best system for your farm? And then you're looking at doing your budgets and getting your plans drawn up. And before you take that leap of faith, if you have all those plans in place, you have a much better idea where you're going to land when you jump off that rock there. So you can't beat good preparation and spending the time to do it rather than rushing it through just because it's the latest flavour of the month with grant aid or we're short of labour, whatever. Just do the work and spend the time, and you'll have a much better system that's going to last you far, far longer into the future. So
it's really good, okay. Nigel, and we've had a pertinent comment to finish on, that if you are putting in robots because you don't like milking cows, you really need to think whether you ought to stay in dairy farming. I think that's a good point to end on, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay, good that's stuff. Good. Well, thank you very much for your time on this, Nigel, because I think it really is important that we get people to think about these things quite thoroughly rather than just jump into it. I personally work in the east of the country and I've seen a lot of dairies go out. I like to keep my dairy farmers in dairy farming and enjoying it. So thank you all very much for your questions that have come in. Please do get in touch if you wish to ask anything further, or contact your local knowledge exchange manager if we need to produce anything more for you on the robot content. Otherwise, we'll thank you for your time and say goodbye. Have a good afternoon.
Bye now.